Hello everyone, this is Amit on behalf of Team Current Affairs Review. I welcome you to this video on Sino-Russian relationship. Yes, the issue is really odd, and intentionally we are taking up these kind of issues. We were going through previous question papers of UPSC, the civil service examination conducted by UPSC, and we were seeing that UPSC has been taking up these kind of topics. However, hardly any magazine, or by magazine I mean the magazines or the current affairs materials available whether online or physically in respect to preparation of civil services, including let's not name the magazines, including some famous magazines, and at the same time the TV debates, whether Rajya Sabha TV debates or these kind of debates, they are normally not focusing on these kind of odd issues. Given that particular respect or given that particular condition, we decided to choose this kind of topics. Let's carry on with the topic, Sino-Russian relationship and its implication on India. That's the understanding, that's a broad outline of the topic. Before starting with the topic, I would like to share certain statistics with you. July 2017, navies of the two countries, China and Russia, they conducted their first exercise in the Baltic Sea. September 2018, China participates in Russian annual Vostok military exercise. Not only that, it was also in January 2017 when we saw China, Pakistan and Russia going for their first ever joint military exercise. Russia sells China S-400 air defense system, 24 Sukhoi 35 fighter aircrafts. Simultaneously, China is right now also trying to buy S-500, which is under development right now. Trade between China and Russia grew from $69.6 billion in 2016 to $84.2 billion in 2017 to $107.1 billion in 2018. Russia is right now the largest crude oil supplier to China, surpassing Saudi Arabia since 2016. China in fact contracted with Russia to buy 1.3 trillion cubic feet of gas annually through Power of Siberia gas pipeline. The gas pipeline that's connecting the eastern part of Russia with China, the name of that is Power of Siberia. The Chinese President Xi Jinping, he visited Moscow more than any other capital city in the world. In fact, Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, they have met till now, from 2013 till today, they have met for 26 times. And on a number of occasions we have seen Xi Jinping referring to Vladimir Putin as my best friend. Okay. Given these particular statistics which we are seeing, it is imperative how close China and Russia relationship is getting today. In this backdrop, let's look at the relationship holistically. Now, if we say we would try to understand this relationship holistically, we have to divide this relationship in three phases. The first phase would start from 1950s or 1949 till 1991. The second phase, 1991 means that's the watershed year of disintegration of Soviet Union. 1991 to 2014 would be the second phase, and the third phase would be from 2014 onwards till today. And in this backdrop, we are also going to look at the implication of this relationship on India. Okay, let's start with the first phase, that is from 1949 to 1991. See, in the initial years, especially till Stalin was there, Joseph Stalin was there as the president of Soviet Socialist Republic, the relationship between China and Soviet Union was pretty close. It's obvious, they both were communist countries and they were very close to each other. 1956, 3 years after the death of Stalin, Nikita Khrushchev, the then premier of Soviet Union, openly denounced a number of Stalinist policies. Now this didn't go down well with Mao Zedong, the then leader of Communist China. Okay. China by the time was already having its own ambition of becoming the leader of the communist bloc. Yeah, China always had this intention of becoming one of the global leaders, one of the superpowers of the world. Result, Chinese attitude was becoming very aggressive. China was posturing very aggressively in its neighborhood. And all these things, they were not going down very well with Soviet Union. Simultaneously, China was also looking for accessing Soviet nuclear weapons. Not only that, they were also looking for accessing the technology of producing nuclear weapons from Soviet Union. But this was hard to come. This was not actually coming. This became another major reason between the discord behind the discord between China and Soviet Union. Simultaneously, from 1956 onwards, we would see Nikita Khrushchev and Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, they would take personal interest in closing India-Soviet Union relationship. In fact, the effect of this would be that in 1962 war, in spite of India fighting with a communist country called China and USA siding with India, Soviet Union would decide not to side with China. Soviet Union would say, ki, on one hand we have a communist country, on the other hand we have a friend. So it's better that we remain neutral, and they would remain neutral. This was a moral victory for India. And when this happened, China took it very seriously. China didn't like this. All these things, they were building a background or a backdrop of increasing China-Soviet Union tensions. And this tension would heighten in 1964. There is a river valley, or there is a river called Ussuri River between China and eastern part of Soviet Union or eastern part of Russia. Just for a mere few hundred kilometers, China would go to a war with Soviet Union in 1964. It was a limited scale war, but no doubt a war. And this would heighten the strain between the two neighbors. After that, there was no point of, or there was no question of China and Soviet Union closing up with each other. In fact, in 1970, we would see that Pakistan would mediate rather between China and USA. And since then, China would start supporting USA in Cold War as against Soviet Union. Just imagine, that's how China kept on moving from one side to another. So from 1970 onwards, we would see China practically siding with USA. In fact, this was also the reason why USA helped China to replace Taiwan in UNSC. Yeah, originally the seat in UNSC, in India we have a huge debate that China was not there in UNSC. It was Taiwan who was there in UNSC. The Republican government of Taiwan, they were one of the founders of UN. So they have always been there in UN. And in 1970-71, we would see with US help, China would replace Taiwan and become the member of UNSC. Okay. So these things happened. And after that, China would practically side with USA as against Soviet Union till 1991. The whole era of Cold War, we would see China on the other side of the lobby. Anyway, whatever it might be. But Soviet Union, on the other hand, we know that how Soviet Union sided with India in 1971 war. While China and Pakistan, China and the USA, they were siding with Pakistan. So Soviet Union stood by India. But still, Soviet Union tried to maintain some balance, some sanity in its China approach. In 1989, we would see Mikhail Gorbachev, the then president of Soviet Union, would go to China to normalize the relationship. Soviet Union, they were trying to maintain a balance. But from the Chinese side, hardly we would see any initiative in this place. Anyway, all these things were about to change. 1990, Russia would separate from Soviet Union, and this would prompt the disintegration of Soviet Union in 1991. You can easily understand that if Russia moves away from Soviet Union, there was no point in Soviet Union existing anymore. So 1991, Soviet Union would disintegrate. From the very beginning, Russian economy was in a very bad shape. 10 businessmen or 10, 11 businessmen in Russia, they are called the Russian oligarchs. They were scheming off, they were getting hold of, they were practically bullying and getting hold of the state assets, and they were looting Russian economy. It was in this backdrop, and Russian economy was going down the drain practically, and it was in this backdrop that in 1998-99 Vladimir Putin would come to power. And from the very beginning, Putin would go for a strong-handed rule of Russia. And it is under Putin that Russian economy started consolidating. Truly, in that respect, Putin has done a great work. Just imagine, Putin came to power in 1998-99. 2001, just 2-3 years, a report was being prepared. An economic report was being prepared by one of the heads of the economic research division of Goldman Sachs, the second largest investment bank in USA, Mr. Jim O'Neill. He was writing this report. And what he writes in that report, the heading of the report was Building Better Global Economic Bricks. And what he writes in the report? He says that 4 economies, including Russia, they're going to alter the complete scenario of the top 5 economies of the world by 2050. Just imagine, within 2-3 years, this is a change that Putin made. Phenomenal, no doubt. On the other hand, if you look at China, 1989 there would be a major incident in China, Tiananmen Square incident, we all know about it. And after that, the West, which was till now supporting China, they would turn against China. Sanctions would be imposed on China. And China was not being able to import Western weaponries anymore. This would initiate another change in Chinese policy. China was looking at modernizing its armed forces. Chinese armed forces, they were really bulky, and China was going for modernizing its armed forces. But how to modernize? Because if better weapons from the West, they don't come, how are you going to modernize? So from 1991, we would see China to cozy up with Russia. That China, which during Cold War was siding with the West, now starts cozying up with Russia. In fact, by 2010, 90% of the Chinese weaponries, 90% of the hardware used by Chinese armed forces were from Russian origin. Not only that, China accounted for 40% of the defense exports of Russia. China started buying oil, gas, everything practically from Russia. 6% of its oil import was from Russia. 4% of its gas import was from Russia. This way, China and Russia relationship were already cozying up from 1991 onwards. So it's not a new thing. It was going on since then. And Russia, on the other hand, as we have discussed, they were looking at building their economic cloud. But this whole scenario would change by 2014. In 2014, a revolution would start in one of the neighboring countries of Russia called Ukraine. Orange Revolution, we may have heard of it. In number of countries, revolutions were going on during that time. It started with Tunisia. These were called the Jasmine Revolution. Later on, this Jasmine Revolution also spread to former Soviet bloc countries and came to be known as Colored Revolution. In Ukraine, the name of the revolution was Orange Revolution. We may discuss this in details in some other video. Here I would prefer to avoid this particular topic. This topic of the revolutions, Jasmine Revolution, Colored Revolutions, all these things. In Ukraine, when the revolution started, Orange Revolution started, EU, NATO, they all started supporting that revolution. Why? Because the government in Ukraine, which was there in place, they were supporters of Russia. And Russia was getting some advantages in Ukraine. Obviously, they were neighboring countries, they had a very close relationship, you can understand. And they both were Soviet-era partners. Especially in Ukraine, there happened to be one particular naval base. Down south of Ukraine, there was a peninsula called Crimea. Crimea or Crimea. The West, they pronounce it as Crimea. I don't know whether to pronounce it Crimea or Crimea. I would prefer to pronounce it as Crimea. So, Down south on Black Sea, there was a particular peninsula called Crimea. And in Crimea, there was one naval base, a Soviet-era naval base called Sevastopol. Sevastopol was operated by Russia in turn. It was not being operated by Ukrainian Navy. So the land was Ukrainian land, but it was a Russian offshore naval base. And people of Crimea, they were also originally of Russian origin. Sevastopol was actually the eye of this revolution. Why? The location of Sevastopol is unique. If you control Sevastopol, you would practically control the whole of Black Sea region. And Black Sea is becoming very important nowadays. Down south of Black Sea, you'll have Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan. On the other hand, you have Turkey. At least 6 major oil pipelines, they are crossing through this region. So you can easily understand how important this region is becoming in international relations. And West, European Union, NATO, they were eyeing this Sevastopol naval base. And as a result, they were supporting this revolution in Ukraine. NATO was giving statements that the moment the revolution becomes successful in Ukraine, NATO is going to pull Ukraine in its fold. EU was saying, European Union was saying if the revolution becomes successful, EU would immediately take Ukraine in its fold and will change the Ukrainian economy. All these big talks. We also saw the US ambassador in Ukraine. She got down on the streets, started distributing food packets, water pouches among the revolutionaries. The idea is to make the revolution successful. Russia also realized what's happening. What they did? I don't know, it's an allegation. We saw a revolution to start in Crimea. The Russian-speaking people of Crimea, they went for a counter-revolution. Revolution against the revolution in Ukraine. What was their demand? They want to separate from Ukraine and they want to join Russia. God knows from where some soldiers also came up. These soldiers were not wearing uniform of any country. They were wearing black uniforms. They started providing protection to these revolutionaries in Ukraine, in Crimea. And the revolution was going on in Crimea. Now these revolutionaries, they organized a plebiscite in Crimea. And in the plebiscite, 98% people voted in favor of joining Russia. When the result of the plebiscite came out, lower house of the Russian parliament, Duma, they immediately passed a resolution making Crimea a part of Russia. What happened? Europe, America, they prepared the cake. Russia came, ate the cherry, went out. As simple as that. But everyone realized what happened. Anyway, the moment this happened, Europe was very angry with Russia. What has happened? Immediately, they decided that they have to punish Russia. Now, Russia by this time was the world's largest producer of oil and natural gas. Second largest producer of natural gas, largest producer of oil. And this was the primary export product of Russia by this time. And the main market of Russian oil and gas was Western Europe. So what Europe did? They imposed sanction. USA, Europe, they all imposed sanction on Russia and stopped buying oil and gas from Russia to hit Russian economy, to cripple Russian economy. It was in this backdrop that China came in support of Russia. Okay? Today, the agreements that we are looking at between Russia and China, they actually happened during that particular point of time. China decided that for next 30 years, for next 3 decades, they would, every year they would be buying 1.3 trillion cubic feet of gas from Russia. And because of that, Russian economy started stabilizing again. Another major change happened. Russia, though they have a huge clout, Russia is practically the inheritor of Soviet influence. Whether you talk about Syria, you talk about Egypt, you talk about any Iran, Russia has huge clout, huge political clout in that respect. On the other hand, China do not have this clout. But Russia today know that they are practically out of the race to be the superpower again. Right now, the condition is that Russia cannot be able to challenge USA in the near future. So they decided that they are going to play second fiddle and stabilize themselves till they are in a position to stake claim to be the superpower of the world. So they would, till the point of time, they would play second fiddle. And China, on the other hand, China right now has the ambition. See, this is a China who had the ambition to replace Soviet Union and be the leader of communist bloc. Now their ambition is to replace USA and be the only superpower of the world. Okay? But they don't have the clout. It was here that Russia and China, they realized if they align with each other, their interests also align, properly merge, and they can jointly create a bloc against USA. And that's how we are seeing Russia-China relationship to further cozying up. It is because of this that the present cooperations which we discussed in the beginning of this video, that all these things, they are happening. Okay. Now, what are the implications of all these on India's relationship or on India? See, just like China, India also used to depend on Russian weaponries. Right now, 80% of the hardware used by Indian armed forces are of Russian origin. Not only that, Russia has been one of the strong players or strong support behind India. Right now, India has a huge stake, including Afghanistan, Iran, all these places. And if Russia moves away from India, India stands to lose a lot. The way we saw the first Russia, China, Pakistan joint exercise in the beginning of 2017, this is unprecedented. Previously, Russia used to avoid any such cooperation with Pakistan. Just imagine today, it's Russia who gave the engines of MiG-29 to China, and using those engines only, China built JF-17 Thunder aircraft, which they are saying that they have jointly developed with Pakistan. And Russia allowed permission, or Russia gave permission to China to export 50 such fighter aircrafts to Pakistan. This way, if Russian technologies start going to Pakistan, the gap that is there between Indian armed forces and Pakistani armed forces, they can be matched to a certain extent. The technological gap between the two countries. So India stands to lose a lot. On Indian side, we are taking steps. In the recent visit of the Indian Prime Minister, you have seen that India signed the KA-226T helicopter deal. The AS-400 deal has also been signed. Simultaneously, when this time Mr. Modi went to Russia, he offered Russia a $1 billion soft loan to develop the eastern seaboard of Russia. India is also leasing to naval dockyards on the eastern seaboard of Russia. Why? There is lack of job opportunities in that region. If India leases those particular naval dockyards, India will be able to fasten its naval ship production. On the other hand, Russians would get job in turn. So it's a win-win situation. Simultaneously, 60% of the Arctic region is owned by Russia. India and Russia, they also agreed to jointly cooperate and explore the Arctic region as well. This way, India is trying to balance the relationship with Russia. We also know how India is giving significance to RIC, Russia, India, China bloc within BRICS. We have seen the formation of Oil Buyers Club based on this particular grouping, RIC. So this way, India is trying to balance between USA and Russia. Let's see how it goes. However, one statement we would like to make, we have made this statement in the article as well, that India stands to lose a lot if India loses Russia's friendship. We need to take immediate steps, we need to take urgent steps, and we need to balance this relationship. That's all. Thank you.